Okay, so I promised I'd be right back. This is video 10 of the Gerhardt Konig trial. You got to go back and watch maybe even just the previous video. It should be right in my profile right next to each other. In fact, all these videos are right next to each other. If you go into my profile, you can watch them all. Anyway, we are now at Scott Henderson. So Scott Henderson also works as a criminalist for the Honolulu PD. He is another DNA specialist. Now, I'm going to get into this. There's a lot of numbers. I need to use my notes, but it starts off with, just like every witness, we have to verify that they're an expert witness, right? So we go through all of his background. Here's what he's done. Here's the training. Here's the certifications. Here's everything that he's had to prove that he is capable of testifying on this topic in court. Now, the thing you got to know about this particular crime lab is that it was just upgraded to the most recent technology. Now, for whatever reason, I know there's funding, I know there's circumstances, I know the level of crime, all kind of drive the technology and the processes that are used in labs. There are always new computer systems and new softwares and new things like that, but they also cost money. And this technology is called probabilistic genotyping. Say that 10 times fast. I say newer. It's new to the Honolulu PD, but it's been around several years, and other police departments are well ahead of them in using it and instituting it. But it's just different processes, it's different softwares, it's different programs. It's being able to understand the probability of including this as a DNA marker or excluding. So basically saying, if I'm trying to match something to your DNA, is it a probable that you should be included as a match or excluded as a match? Now, by the way, Scott Henderson says we don't use the word match. And I'm like, why the fuck don't we use the word match? Because they measure up to 1 trillion times likelihood, meaning it is 1 trillion times more likely that it is this person's DNA than this person's DNA. So we're going to argue that it's this person's DNA, but they won't use the word match. And I'm like, 1 trillion times. And that's the highest measurement. I'm like, oh, that's a fucking match where I come from. But anyway, I'm going to use the word match. He did not use the word match. I'm feeling very risky, so I'm going to say it's a match. Now, they also went through this process of saying, but even though your lab was once upon a time on this older technology, you always made your certification. You always passed all the audits. There was never a moment where your lab wasn't accredited. And Scott Henderson says, yes, like we still were a very well functioning lab, even though we were kind of doing stuff the old fashioned way. I think they did this for the juries because they were probably thought that the defense was going to try to put up some barriers to say, well, maybe this lab's not that good. They're very antiquated, or the opposite. Oh, convenient that this is one of the first major crimes that they have used this new technology on. And all you need is one juror to go, are we sure the new technology works? Are we sure they have enough training on it? So I understand why this is a topic. So let's start off with the rock. So they do both inclusion work and exclusion work. And forgive me because I have to kind of dumb this down for myself to understand it. You guys might be much smarter than me, but I'm taking his testimony and I'm trying to kind of make it into bite-sized morsels. They essentially ran 2 different scenarios on the rock, right? So they have the stained side and they ran the test. They have swabs from both Ariel and Gerhardt. So they have comparison DNA, which to me is the easiest way to match when you have something that you're looking for. But they did a couple of different tests. They said, okay, let's search for these known commodities, and then let's search to see what the likelihood is that it's anybody else. And essentially what they came up with, and again, I'm just cutting to the chase, but basically what they said is, we're very damn sure that this red blood stain matches the DNA of Ariel Konig. Then on the other side of the rock, right, the unstained side, they tested that again for both parties, and then they also tested, like, what's the likelihood it's Ariel plus a stranger, or it's 2 strangers, what's the likelihood? And so they could exclude and include. And what they found was that there were 2 contributors of DNA on the other side of the rock, the unstained side of the rock, and their testing tells them that it matches Ariel and Gerhardt. So those of you who are like, maybe she hit herself with the rock. No, Gerhardt's DNA was on the rock. But we need to talk about the stained t-shirt that Gerhardt was wearing when he was apprehended. So there's a couple of stains, and here's a picture, and you see there's a couple of spots, and I know this is like inverted, so I'm not sure if but he, they allege like he's hitting her with his right hand, right? She was hit on the right side of her head. So she's hit on her right side of her head. He's right-handed. He's hitting her like this. And as he goes back like this, there's blood spatter going on his shirt. And it makes sense that it would go kind of near the armpit area and then on the chest. So there's these two spots on the shirt that they test. So first they run the test to say, could this be Ariel's blood, right? So they cross-reference and they do the search for hers. And again, they come up with that 1 trillion likelihood, very strong indicator that this is her DNA on the shirt. But to be safe, they also do exclusionary work on Gerhardt, because remember, all the way back to the beginning, I said that he might have a self-defense defense, like she was hitting him first. This is why the prosecution wanted pictures of him, kind of mugshot photos, to show he really had no injuries. They wanted that put in, or at least available to use as evidence if the defense comes forward and says she was beating him up and he just grabbed a rock to fight her off, right? So there would be injuries on him. So what they needed to do was do exclusionary work on these two stains to somehow exclude it from being Gerhardt's. And again, they're working with what they call assumed contributors. So they're looking for markers that, there's that word match, but align with the people whose DNA samples they already have, right? So they're kind of running like, could it be strangers? We don't think so. It's far more likely that it is either one of these two people we already have markers for. So what they did was they ran Ariel, right? And they said it was 1 trillion times more likely that it was Ariel's blood than anybody else's. I think they ran both inclusion and exclusion on Gerhardt to see if it was his blood on his shirt. And it was, where it's 1 trillion times likely it's hers, it's only 0.00351% that it could be his. So 1 trillion versus 0.00351. Big difference. So I'm calling it and saying it's a match for her and not him. But with this information, they said we can come to the conclusion that she is included, that it is most likely hers, and that he is excluded. So the two stains on his shirt are blood from her. And it does look like, and I think that if we had, one of those cool microdots videos, because I fell in love with those microdots dudes during the Karen Reed trial. But seriously, like if you like reenacted this, it would be just that. It would be he hits, and as he flails back like this, the blood splatters on his shirt. So the blood from the rock is carried, like the rock transfers from her head to his shirt. That makes total sense to me. So that's what we got out of Scott Henderson's testimony. Of course, it's now the weekend. Trial is back in session as of tomorrow morning. And if I can, I will get around to watching as much as I can and report back some more.